for... Whoops, that's not an F. Hello. Why are you licking my electronics? Hello everybody, welcome back to the Whimsy and Metaphor Write-Along Club. So, I have my actual writing program open this time instead of my notes app on my tablet, which is, holy crap, we are making progress. But I will potentially not be using it this episode. Today we're going to be setting up all of the things that we need to actually get into starting writing the outline, which I know I've said several times now. Partially that's because I keep forgetting that there are extra steps. So there are a couple of things that I'm going to get done in this episode, and the first is that we're going to start putting a timeline together. Partially so that when I'm actually writing the outline, I've got some things that I can direct myself towards, but also partially because that helps me figure out scope issues. Because I need to keep this under a certain word count to avoid this completely spiraling out of control, this section is going to let me just get the vibe of how much needs to happen in the story, whether I'm still on track to meet that rough word count, or whether we need to start cutting things, or whether I need to change approach or change tactic. Probably will need to do some change of approach and tactics in the actual outline itself, because this is just how the process works. But some of it we can get sorted out now while we're still in dot point format, and that's good. So let us switch to opening up this piece of... I forgot to cancel the thing at the top of the screen. This is embarrassing. Timeline. So, how do I start working on a timeline? What I want to end up with is a list of events that are in chronological order. That's all I'm really doing with this. Sometimes, if I've got something more complicated, I often do sort of two streams, like this character's doing this character's doing this, but usually it is chronological and it's in order of what order the scenes come in. So what order the reader gets the information, not necessarily what order the characters are operating in. Basically, the first thing that I do for the timeline is I start to write down the ideas for scenes that I know I already have, or the ideas for events that I know I already have. So the first thing I'm going to write down here is I know that Blackbird needs to go and try and get advice or make contact in some way or another. We're going to have Blackbird doing a lot of traveling. I know that we're going to have a point where we reach crisis for the Ransom King, where we're going to start to have all of those political debts coming due, and this juggling act of trying to keep everybody happy, trying to get everybody's priorities sorted out such that they all feel like their priorities are respected, while also not being able to put all of them at number one. That is all going to come crashing down. So, crisis for RK, Ray, politics, and priorities. And one thing I do want to note here when I'm talking about these kinds of things, I'm probably going to start using the word politics a lot. And I want to note that I'm using it in a very specific sense. When I talk about politics in a story context, unless I state otherwise, I'm talking about a character going through the process of, or attempting to manage, a lot of conflicting expectations and a lot of conflicting ideas about managing some system that is larger than any of its participating individuals. Here I'm using it, and it is in that sense of running a country politics. But if we were going over, say, one of my other stories where we're talking more about competing small business owners, that's still politics as far as this definition goes. We know that someone needs to visit the country of the undead, the land of the undead. We know that someone needs to go there, because I didn't have all of these cool ideas of how to describe this place just to not use them in the story. We need probably a confrontation between BB and RK. We also need RK and Queen of Undead to have surprisingly heart-to-heart conversation, I think is the vibe I want to go with here. We know we need at least one roadblock. So we need at least one roadblock stemming from the regional areas being treated badly or not as they expected. We need at least one of these things to happen, which is probably going to start to lead into that, but I won't necessarily put that down just now. But having that as, knowing that leads into this final breakdown, I guess, sort of leads me to think that this is the kind of thing that is bubbling away at the start of the story, develops as the story goes, and then hits a crisis point where it becomes, we add this scene, and this is no longer a background problem that is theoretical. It is a front and center problem that has a face. And then we have it going on. So maybe this kind of happens. It's either going to happen sort of 1/3 to 3/4 of the way through the story, right? It's either going to be something that happens and then that's when we start to really throw in all of the problems happening at once. And it's one of a big cascade of things that start to tip us towards that midpoint of the story, right? And then you have something else that turns us towards that big ending point, or this is going to be the harbinger of that end point. And I don't necessarily know which one it is right now. I'm sort of leaning towards the first one. I think Queen of Undead or Undead something is the pre-climax turning point. I think that's how this goes. I think there've been a thing for a while, but part of this is about getting the Queen of the Undead to actually sit up and take note, right? So something where this becomes unavoidable or not ignorable, or where she finally does something that either is interference or could be construed as interference for political reasons happens. I'm going to go back up here for a sec. I'm going to make a little note here because I think this is not the first time. Not the first meeting. So I think we're going to start from here and we're going to start to see how we go. One of the things to note about this timeline is that there's a couple of different categories of things, right? We've got kind of individual scenes, which is this, not kind of this. We've got things that are, I guess you could call them events, and they are separate because they are not necessarily in one scene. So, for example, we've got visiting the land of the undead. Well, that's kind of a background thing. Someone is likely to spend several scenes there. It is an event that happens. Someone does go and visit, but it isn't a self-contained scene in and of itself the way that the confrontation scene or the conversation scene is, right? So we've got that. We've got this kind of roadblock thing, this one as well, and I think this one. And then we've got things that are almost more like a note to self. The Blackbird is doing a lot of traveling. I need to keep that in mind when I'm talking about where the Blackbird needs to be at any given time. So let me erase those. They're not important for the rest of this. But we do want to end up with a list that is just what I marked as the white scenes, right? There we go. I've just given myself a new section and I've extended that title over it a little bit just so that it's a little bit more visually obvious that these are part of the same things. Not because I expect to need this to be visually obvious, because I will understand what my own ramblings are, just it will bother me if it doesn't happen, perhaps is the way to phrase that. So, we're going to start with the Blackbird meeting up with the Queen of the Undead. I think that's our first scene. And I'm debating whether to talk about why now or why when we start the outline. And I think I'm going to go with when we start the outline. Because I think going through that as part of my process for why I'm writing the things in that scene that I am is going to be a lot more relevant. But for now, let's just say that there is a thing in my brain and there are reasons behind it, but I will get into those reasons in a second. I think that is our first scene. I think this goes at the end. Yeah, that does go there. I think this comes up here. This definitely goes somewhere like here-ish. I'm trying to get the shape of this. I'm wondering whether I can do a little diagram somewhere over this side, maybe. Let me just cordon us off a little section here. No, I don't think I can. I'm not a visual person. Diagrams do not come naturally to me. Let me see if I can try and talk through what I'm thinking, because there is a shape of this story that is coming together in my head. How to explain this? How do I think about this? I'm starting to put things into a bit of an order in my head. And very basically, let me see if I can do something that's a little bit diagrammy and see how it works. So we've got this point down here, which we're going to call starting point, which is kind of, I guess, low simmer, and it's quiet tense. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are already happening by this point, right? The political unrest does not start here. This is not a catalyst. We are dropping in the middle of some shit going down. And we've got almost a ramp. This is like onboarding. This is the time that I have to get the reader up to speed with what's going on. And it's actually very short in this case. Then, how does this work in my head? So we've kind of got this section where up here at the top of this kind of thing is RK's deal, which is things are frantic, it's intense, he's already at the end of his rope, right? Then we have in the middle here, we've got, I'm gonna do it this way, do we have, no, we have Queen of Undead here, who is tense like a tug of war, right? She's trying to hold this center in between all of the directions that she's being pulled in. And then at the bottom here, we've got BB, who is personally intense, interpersonally laissez-faire. So BB's job in this section is to, or Blackbird's job in this section, is to pop up randomly, to do things, to instigate things, to be all wrapped up in his own or their own little ball of nonsense and make it everybody else's problem. But there's a lot of stuff that's going to be going on here. Blackbird is not dealing with any immediate problems. It's very difficult and intense for Blackbird, but externally, they're not under any pressure yet. So we've got this section here, and then we've got a thing that happens, and I don't know what it is. We've got this section here, where suddenly everything gets real pointy real quick for a sec. We've got this big spike. We have some shuffling in who's doing what, but it's going to change around who's doing what in this section. It's going to change who's on top of that tension pile. It's going to change what kind of tension they're experiencing. And then we have another section which goes on for a little while. And I don't know exactly what happens in here yet, but I think this is going to be the section where we kind of get... And that's my way of indicating should this be horizontal? I don't know. I think it's got to be vertical. I think it has to be vertical. No, I'm going to do this another way. I think then we get this point that I'm going to illustrate like this. Okay. We're kind of getting to a point where they're starting to all come together. Then we have this bit here, go away, where we have Arche Crisis, and then underneath we've got them, and we may even have like a Arche Crisis, BB Crisis, Queen of Undead, like staggered cascade thing going on. This might not be in this order, by the way. I'm just kind of figuring out how to visually represent what I'm thinking about here. And then we have Resolution. I don't think I like this here. I don't think this means what I think it means. I think actually kind of what I want to say, it's not a convergence so much as it is a like... that sort of thing, where none of this means anything, but there's a point where everything gets chaotic and messy and everybody's intersecting and everybody's affecting each other. I think maybe that's more what I'm trying to convey. And I also think if I'd planned ahead, I would have actually put this whole diagram on kind of that angle, because we're kind of doing a thing where we've got this at this level of tension, and then this sort of looks a little bit similar, but with everybody in different places, but like tension level, it's up here, right? And then we have that kind of continuing, and because it's not a short story, but it is a shorter story, we're not going to get a huge drop here. But we do need to wrap things up just a little bit. So you'll notice as I'm doing this that I haven't really talked about any particular act structure or any particular type of framework that I'm using to think about this. I don't tend to use that kind of framework to think about how the story will end up going. And I'm going to try and put some thoughts down about that, but if I thought that the discussion last time was going to set off discourse, oh boy, oh, is this discussion going to set off even more? All models are wrong, some are useful, right? I've looked at a lot of them, I've read a lot of them, I've got Save the Cat, I know the general gist of the Blake Snyder's cheat sheet and that kind of thing. I know they exist. If pressed, I could probably give a description of some of them. I don't know the details of many, and I don't think about stories that way. So the other way that I could have sort of written about this, and the more I look at this sort of section here, the more I'm not happy with the way I've depicted it. Let's just remove these for a sec because I've described what they are. As I had sort of noted here, this is quiet, tense, low simmer. I could then have this as like building, how do I want to describe that? What is that emotion that I'm feeling in my head? So here we've kind of got this section where it's very intense. There's a lot of things going on, but predominantly it's actually about a lot of people just being real tired of having so much to do. It's about that sense of overwork and burnout. The Queen of the Undead's got a lot of resignation. The blackbird is kind of bird beats its wings against cage, that sort of thing. There's a lot of activity, but there's a real sense of futility about it all. And then there's a big turning point here where everything becomes... I'm going to leave that for a sec. But you've got this big turning point here where that is in flux. So that's what I'm going to put here. That's in flux. And then you've got this section that I have. This is still not the way it kind of fits in my head. This section is like, this is a lot more intense, right? It is an escalation of that tension. But with it as well, we've knocked all of the characters out of their complacency. And you've got this section that's very much more about regret and betrayal and these real, like, tight in the chest, bubbling sensations of everything is going wrong all at once. This is all either my fault or everyone else's fault. I am making bad decisions. I can feel myself making bad decisions and I hate it, and I'm going to take it out on all of the other main characters. That kind of thing. And then we have this resolution, which is kind of another, you've got these kinds of, this is another flux section, but it's more about kind of release and and then you have this resolution section, which is kind of about contemplation. I don't know. It will be very philosophical. It's going to be a lot more attached to the themes than it will be to the characters, but it's kind of taking this emotional release and just sitting with that for a second. And then you let it go and end the story. So getting back to the point that I was originally talking about, because oh boy, have we gone off on a tangent, about not using the act structure or any of the act structures. I said something before kind of offhandedly, which is all models are wrong, some are useful. But what I mean by that is that the act structure, it is very much a framework. But there's a lot of them, and they do different things, and they break up a story in different ways. And this is just for this story. You know, this is very specifically how I feel this story shaping up. So what I'm doing when I make these structures is I'm partially drawing on the emotional arc that I think is going to be satisfying, but I'm also drawing on these 3-act structures and the knowledge of these tri-fail cycles, the beat sheets, 7-act structures, 3-5-7 or whatever it is, to kind of mix and match bits and pieces of all of them to get that emotional arc doing what I need it to do. It is important to try out these arcs or try out these structures for yourself. But I think there is a step beyond that in terms of thinking about structures, and it's to be able to use those as a set of base ideas, and to be able to mix and match them, and to be able to take the important parts of them and put them in a different order or put them in a different light. You don't have to try every single one ever. You just have to try enough of them to get a sense of what's going on. You just have to try enough of them that when you look at a new one, you can look at it and say to yourself in your head, okay, this is what it's focusing on. This is what it's controlling. Therefore, this is what it would look like if I were to write a story like this. Some of that you can do with writing yourself. Some of that you can do with reading other people's work and then trying to apply different templates and seeing how well they fit and how well they work, because they are very universal, right? I'm not going to say that this won't map onto a 3-act structure. It might be hard to do the 3-act structure, but you could find your end of Act 1 turning point, your end of Act 2 crisis point, and your resolution in this story. You could find your beat sheet, potentially, but just because you can doesn't mean that's useful information. What's useful information is understanding why these bits and pieces go the way that they go. Let me know in the comments if you want me to go into this diagram in more detail, because this is new for me as well, right? This is something that I've never actually tried to write down before. I always do this as feeling a shape in my head, and then I write this list that we started here, and then completely forgot about for a second, but I usually just go straight to this and then start putting things in order and start fleshing out the gaps. Having to try and discuss it, this is very ad hoc. So if there's anything that doesn't make sense, please do let me know. And yeah, if you want me to go into more detail on this, let me know. So now, having taken us on that huge tangent, I've brought us back down below here. So we're going to start that list again. And we're going to try and do this. So now we're going to start putting some of these scenes in order. And you're going to note that in this timeline, I don't necessarily have everything yet. I still don't know exactly how this is all going to end, but often if I were doing this myself and I were not on some sort of time crunch, I would percolate on this until I had an idea of a good ending point. And I want to point out that thought process right now because, yeah, at this point, often I would like more information, but I know from my own process that if I don't have that information, it's not a game breaker. It's just something that I know is kicking a can down the road. And I usually try to avoid that, but this particular can is not going to cause trouble later. This is maybe not quite enough, but I think I can do this iteratively, which is going to get us to that outline process earlier and through that outline process earlier. I think that's the play, because often as I go, as I'm writing, I do several versions of this. I'll have a version that's quite detailed up here and quite loose down here, and then I'll start to get more detailed and more detailed, and as I hit the end of where things are detailed here, or as I decide something needs to change, I'll go back and I'll rewrite this section and I'll re-timeline that and then keep going with the outline. So I think that's what we're going to do. Thank you. Oh boy, that was a lot to get through. All right. The next stream, I think I'm going to do 2 more episodes before the next stream, because the next one we've got to do the title, we've got to do the set up the document, and then I want to do the first outline thing, the first chapter. And then I want to do one where I start to put together some more of the next sections before I do another stream. So we are going to have 2 more episodes before the next stream. Hopefully things are now under control and they will come out fortnightly as they should. But for now, thank you very much for coming to watch this. I hope whatever time of day it is where you are having a good one. I hope this continues to be interesting and useful. And as always, I will see you in the next episode.